Hello and welcome to the Eating Disorder Therapist podcast. This is a podcast to help you find peace with food and overcome disordered eating. And I'm Harriet Frew, aka the Eating Disorder Therapist. And I'm so excited to share with you all kinds of stories, tips, information and guest interviews to help you on your journey in finding peace with food. So thank you so much for listening today. Now, today I'm speaking to Dr. Rachel Evans. Rachel is a psychologist and hypnotherapist who specialises in eating disorder recovery. She has a private practice in Derbyshire and she also works with clients online. Now, Rachel hasn't always had a great relationship with food. Rachel experienced orthorexia, overexercise, general disordered eating, and later bulimia for several years. But Rachel's come out the other side of all of this, and now she supports others to overcome disordered eating and to find that healthy relationship with food themselves. So I'm really looking forward to this interview to hear all about Rachel's journey and how she supports others today. Hi, Rachel, and thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So, Rachel, could you tell us a bit more, please, about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm a psychologist and also a hypnotherapist, and I work with clients who have eating disorders. And I've got a private practice in Derby, but I also see clients online. Like I was doing that before COVID, but then especially recently, everyone tends to want to be online. Yeah, I don't know what else to tell you.
No, well, fantastic. I mean, it's great to hear that you're doing like a bit of a mix as well, I guess, of that face-to-face and the online. I'm sure it probably brings a bit of variety, does it, to your work?
Yeah, I think some people prefer to be in person, but actually some people prefer to be in their home and like wear their pajamas, and just depends where someone feels more comfortable, I think, really.
Yeah, no, I agree. So, Rachel, you've been on your own journey and overcoming issues with food and body image. So could you tell us, please, a bit more about that journey?
Yes, I will try and keep it in a nutshell. Sometimes I feel like I could talk at someone for an hour about it, but maybe I'll just do the key points. I think I was one of those people growing up that always felt that I was bigger than other people. And I think we, as a society, still very much have the thin ideal. And I went to an all-girls school, so I didn't really talk to boys, and actually I wasn't really that bothered about talking to boys. But then when I was at university, then I was more bothered about talking to boys, and I just kind of thought like, oh, boys will like me more if I'm thinner or if I look a different way. So I was doing like various diets sort of on and off, and I did a lot of sports as well at the time. And maybe looking back now at certain points, it was quite restrictive and like calorie counting and not eating that much and over exercising, but didn't feel like an eating disorder to me because I could like snap out of it for various things. Like I could still go on a night out and drink alcohol, but it kind of was up and down with how strict. It was more like, actually, you probably heard people say, if there was an event or something that I wanted to look good for and fit in the dress, then what look good for in inverted commas in my mind, which looking good would have been being thinner, then I would go on the diet. But then after that, I could kind of park it to the side for a while. But things really changed when I did my master's in health psychology. So I wanted to go into health promotion. And again, I kind of thought like, oh, if I am going to be trying to encourage other people to be healthier, then I need to look super healthy. And again, that was thinking like, oh, healthy is having a six pack, and healthy is drinking kale smoothies and eating chia seeds and those like sort of things. And I think as well at the time, it was like a lot of bloggers were coming on the scene with clean eating, and that was sort of a thing. But I think for me as well, like I'd stopped doing the sports that I was a part of, and then like my friends from uni had gone away, and I think it was just a lot of factors as well that kind of led me to thinking about food maybe a bit too much. And then I did have a boyfriend. Oh, I don't know if you heard me say this on another podcast, because I always say, oh, I thought he was my boyfriend. He didn't think he was my boyfriend, and he didn't really treat me very well. But when I broke up again, it was kind of like, oh, now I need to look really good to make him jealous or make him regret what he did to me. And so it was like extra drive to work out, to eat healthy. And then I think, and quite often eating disorders can start as a diet for people. So for me, it was very much going down the slippy slope and then slipping so far that I didn't realize what was happening. Like, I didn't think that I had a problem, but my family could see that I did. I feel like this is not the condensed version. Sorry.
No, it's fine. No, it's really interesting. Actually, I think hearing the details, I think so many people can relate to this. So carry on, Rachel.
Yeah. So then I was following loads of influencers online who I wanted to be like, and interestingly, some of them actually have, like, one of them in particular called Sophie Gray, like, she's a Canadian influencer. She was doing a lot of like sports programs, like where you buy someone's ebook and it tells you all the exercises to do to look like them and what to eat to look like them. She was doing that, but since then she's come out and said, I didn't have a very good relationship with food or myself, and has like deleted all of her bikini pictures, like everything online. But at the time, she was kind of very in it and I was very in it, and I wanted to look like her. And when I was living at home during my master's to save money, and so my parents were still kind of in control of what I was eating. Like, I was doing my own thing and not eating with them all the time, but still it was like, oh, I can't do exactly what I want to do. And then I got a job abroad in Singapore. So I moved there. I was thinking, oh my God, this is going to be amazing. Like, I'd done a year abroad for my undergrad in Australia. So I was like, oh, I've lived abroad. It was like amazing. But I didn't realize Singapore is very different. And I just got quite isolated when I was there, which again fed into, let's be more strict about food. Like, not consciously, but I think just had happened. And I wanted to be a fruitarian and just eat fruit, which was kind of easy because there was lots of fruit there, but it was like so bad for my digestion, and I just totally ignored it. I think it was one of those things that, like, every symptom I was like, oh, this is just the detox, this is going to happen and then I'll feel good. But actually I just felt really rubbish, like physically, but I couldn't see it. I was like so convinced, oh my God, this is what I need to do to be the healthiest possible. But actually, looking back, I wasn't very happy in general. Like, this really good opportunity was like sabotaged from it. And then I was getting all the other sort of side effects, like not being able to control my mood very well. I just, was not very productive at work and I wasn't enjoying it. So then I ended up coming home early, but then it's like, I had no life purpose really. I didn't really know what to do, which again was not helping me get out of the eating disorder. And it wasn't diagnosed as an eating disorder, but I will say it definitely was. And so I lived with my parents again, and I was working for my parents too. And they like left a couple of weeks after I got back and were like, oh, if you've not got a job, come and work for us, like our receptionist has left. So I was doing that. But actually, do you know what the thing is? Just to go on a side tangent for a minute. I think it must have been so hard for my parents. And I don't think I've properly acknowledged it until the other day, in a weird way, because I had someone on a discovery call to talk about working with me, and I could really see all the impact that this was having on her life. But then she wasn't quite ready to take the step and do something about it. And I feel like maybe I got a little bit emotionally involved. Like, I was like, oh gosh, it's taking over her life like this. Do you know, like when you think about it when you're going to bed? And I was like, I literally talked to that lady. I got her, it's like a little booking form. I got her little booking form. I talked to her for like an hour, and I'm feeling like this. I can't even imagine what my parents felt like when they saw me every day, like stressing about food and over exercising and all the other things.
Sure. So it's fascinating, isn't it? I think it's just so hard for a carer, isn't it? Because I think as someone outside looking in, you can feel desperate to help, but if someone's just so in it, not really motivated at that point to change, it's just really, really hard, isn't it, to kind of influence them or anything?
Yeah, like I could not see it. Like, I was like, what I'm doing is healthy, but then I think it got, like I say, was down the slope that I was scared to eat more. I was scared to eat certain things, and I didn't really know what I was scared of. But in the end, my parents did manage to help me. Well, said, we'll pay for you to go to therapy, like just pick someone. So I went for a bit, and to be honest, in the beginning I was like, oh, I just need to complain about my parents where I'm living with them, like just need someone else to talk to. I did have a boyfriend at the time, but like I couldn't really moan about my parents to him. He like wasn't really letting me moan, which annoyed me. But then it's funny, now that I've trained more, like sometimes I think back to the sessions that I had with that therapist and I'm like, oh, I thought we were just having a chat, but actually this is what she was doing. She was trying to help me think about it in a different way. So that was really interesting. Not at the time. And then at the time I kind of stopped restricting, and it was like a switch had been flipped. And once I started eating sort of in the evening and like waking up in the middle of the night to eat, like I just felt like I couldn't stop, and it felt like so autopilot. Not even autopilot, but just like, I can't not. I've just got to go and do this. And so I think when clients tell me that and I'm like, yes, I understand, they're like, oh, really? And I'm like, yeah, obviously we don't want this to be happening to you, but I understand what you say when it's like, I can't not go and do it.
So Rachel, at that point as well, were you in the kind of, is it because you were in that kind of weight restoration phase where the hunger just really kicks in almost after you've been like very restrictive for a long time? Is that what it was, or was it more an emotional kind of pull to eat?
I think it was like the former, just that I was restricting, and in my mind I was being really clever. And I was making sure that I would eat enough of the safe things that my weight wouldn't get really, really low. And then someone would make me be an impatient or make me do something. But it definitely wasn't enough, because I was always hungry, but I just wasn't letting myself eat. And then I think, yeah, once I started, and it was like in the middle of the night when I woke up would be the only time that I would let myself eat that much or eat those certain things. And I kind of describe it like as well, like because it was dark outside, it was kind of like the start of the year and it was dark outside, it kind of felt safe. And it was like me in the kitchen with the kitchen door shut, having these things. It just felt like a cocoon somehow or something, which like the day didn't, because there would be people around looking at me eating, or like I just didn't really like that side of things.
Yeah. So at night it was almost a bit, perhaps you were, or in the evening, you were almost a little bit sort of, yeah, you're in your kind of safe space and perhaps just a little bit more dissociated, do you think, from everything? Yeah.
And then it turned into bulimia, and it wasn't a lot at first. And then I thought, oh, I think I'm getting better, because I did start to eat more in the day. It was still a lot of like, oh, today I'm going to do the paleo diet because that's going to help me not put on weight and try and get back in control. Or today I'm going to be a vegan. Oh, but I like yogurt or something, so now I've failed, so I'll just try a different one tomorrow. So it kind of got back into cycling through different diets to try and help things. The therapist that I went to see wasn't specifically an eating disorder therapist. Like she was really helpful to help me like get a direction in my life and, like I say, sort through some of the things. By things I mean like beliefs about food and things. She did help me challenge those or think about them in a different way. But I'm not sure if things would have been different if I saw a specialist, just in terms of that period when I was going through all different diets and really like, because I think when you're so worried about gaining weight and then it feels out of control, like it does feel scary. What did feel scary for me at the time.
Was your therapist as well able at the time as well, which is sort of talking about kind of regular eating and trying not to be restrictive, like were you able to sort of address that in the therapy? Or
I don't think she talked about regular eating. It was more like I would present her with, okay, this is the thing that I'm scared of. And then we would sort of talk about that and why it's not scary and do some kind of like, oh, well, how much is too much? You know, when I'm like, oh, I couldn't possibly, or just the worries of like, oh, if I start eating that, then I'm not going to stop, or what if I have it and it's not sometimes. And then I do remember once she was like, yeah, but you always say this, like, you're like, oh, I can't stop eating toast or whatever it is. But then in 2 weeks, you're not even bothered about that anymore. You'll be eating something different. So it's not like you're going to carry on eating it ever. So I think she was helpful, but maybe I would have helped to get more specific nutrition advice or help, but because, oh no, this is always a conversation when we're like, don't want to say anything bad about the NHS, but because I didn't quite fit in the box, I couldn't.
Yeah.
Well, actually, no, that's a lie. I think they were going to help me at one point, but then, do you know, when things kind of get strung out a bit, and then I was like, right, I'll just see this private therapist instead. But yeah, it is what it is now, and it was helpful. But then I kind of fell out with her because she said something that I didn't like at the time, so I didn't go back, which probably wasn't the best choice. And sometimes I do tell that to my clients as well, because it's like, if I do say something, because sometimes it's as well that people just interpret it the wrong way. And that's not how you meant it, but when you're just trying to phrase stuff. So like, let's discuss it rather than just like never come back. So yeah, and then I started my PhD this was all going on in like the January, February around time. And then I started was that the right year? Yeah, it was. Sometimes I'm like, what even happened when in my life? Then the bulimia was more of a coping mechanism for stress, which I didn't realise for quite a while, but I was putting a lot of pressure on myself to do really well. But then with a PhD, it's like not clearly defined what you have to do, which is really stressful for me, because in my undergrad, I like being told, do this, do that, then you'll get a first. And I couldn't really cope with that. And then I think it took that getting to a very low point when it was like literally felt like it was taking over my life for me to realise, okay, now I need to do something. Because I think I went back into denial about having an eating disorder. It's like I'd recognised about the under eating, but I was kind of like, oh, I'm over that now. I'm fine. These other binging episodes, or this binging and purging, I didn't recognise that as a problem, or didn't tell anyone, and I didn't try to get help for like a good year and a half, I think, really.
Yeah, no, sure. And when you say that the purging had become a coping mechanism, do you mean sort of like for emotions, maybe if you'd got like overwhelmed, or if you needed like escape, or how did it help you cope, do you think?
Yeah, definitely the overwhelmed, I think, is when I tried to stop, or I was telling myself, right, this is the last time. And then I managed for a few weeks, but then I went to a presentation and it was like the most boring thing ever. And the person was really annoying me. And it was like a 2-day sort of workshop thing. And after the first day, I like didn't feel good, but I went home and like it was fine. But after the second day, it was like I just can't deal with being so annoyed at that person and having to sit there for that long. Like now I'd be able to reframe it like, okay, great, well, that's over now. Whereas then it was like, I don't even know what to do with these feelings. And then I think once you get that sort of urge to purge feeling, like I remember literally just walking round and round and round after going to uni, trying not to go home, because it's like, I don't know what I'm going to do when I go home. Or like calling my boyfriend and, not really knowing what to do. And I went to an eating disorder charity at that point, and they referred me to the NHS. So I had 2 sessions with the NHS, and it was actually there that I was thinking, oh, this is such a silly activity. But she kind of picked up, like, do you think this is a coping thing? And I was like, oh, I kind of went away and thought about it, and it made sense. But then the reason I didn't go back was because I was meant to have a session with the psychologist and a dietitian. And I was actually really interested to talk to the dietitian, because I was like, oh, she's going to help me. But then she wasn't there. And in my mind, I was really offended. I was like, I'm not important. Like all of these things, I just got really angry to myself about it. And I think that anger actually helped me. And the thing is, I was studying about changing habits and not eating disorders, the psychology of eating. So it's like I knew it, but I just didn't apply it to myself. I was just like, somebody please help me.
Yeah.
And I think I got that insight about, okay, this is how it's giving you a reward. And then I could apply that to like, oh, it's the habit. These are the triggers. This is my behavior. This is the reward. So I know that now I can break that habit, but I don't think I would have got that myself without that initial bit of help.
Sure. So it sounds like those things came together at the right time, actually, maybe kind of the things you were studying yourself, and then that one-off appointment. Yeah, it was kind of good timing.
Yeah, just in terms of the coping as well, it was kind of like, because binging and purging takes up a lot of time and a lot of energy. And in my mind, it was like I need an excuse not to go to uni sometimes. And it's like, oh, if I do binge and purge in the morning, then, oh, I'm really tired. I have to stay at home for a while and I can't go until the afternoon, which made sense at the time. But then it was like, actually, once that started to be a habit of me doing that, then I would wake up in the morning and then it was like the first thing that I wanted to do. So,
sure. So it's kind of robbing you of your time and like starting to really have quite a severe impact, I guess, on your studying.
Yeah. Because the thing with a PhD is it's quite flexible. Like, it didn't have to be in, like, there were times that I was testing participants, so I had to be in certain days and certain hours, but the in-between time when you're just writing up stuff or you're planning your studies, actually I didn't need to be in, and no one would care if I was or wasn't, as long as I turned up to certain meetings or like a lecture on a Friday.
Yeah.
So
sure. So what was your journey then to sort of working and supporting others and setting up your own business?
Oh yeah. So from there, I probably, like, when I made the decision to stop and I was like, right, even if I binge, I'm just not going to purge. And then I think the longer you do that, the more it's like, okay, I've invested a lot in not doing this now, so I'm just not going to. And then I think I've realized as well at the time, like, I didn't like doing a PhD. I was like, I like talking to people, and this is not really talking to people. It's like isolating, and people say that, but it's one of those ones that you don't understand until you're doing it. Because it's like, yes, there are people around, but they're not doing the same topic as you, so you can't really have an in-depth conversation with them about it, or sometimes they're busy and, you know, there's no one around when you just want to chat, or you're trying to talk to your family, but it's like you're talking a different language. So, or what was a question when I went on a rant about a PhD? Oh yeah, I realized that I don't really like it. I liked reading a journal paper, but I was putting a lot of pressure on myself then when I was reading it, to think, oh, how does this fit in with everything? Or, oh, you should have read that quicker, and those sort of things. So I was like, oh, actually, do you know what? I do want to work with people. And that is really what I wanted to do from when I was younger. But I just somehow thought, oh, that's not a very good job. I don't know, just in terms of salary, like, there's stuff that you can do that is a lot higher salary, but that's not what I want to do. Do you know, just put in other people's views of what a good job is onto what I wanted to do. And then I was like, oh, okay, I really want to do that. So that was extra incentive not to go back and to build a better relationship with food for myself. And then, oh yeah, so I did a training to work with people with eating disorders. And then I started working with some people, but it was only maybe people who were like, oh, I keep yo-yo dieting, what should I do? It wasn't eating disorders as such. I was still a bit worried for a while. But then I think the more I had sessions with people, then I got more confidence to work with people. And I think as well, like, I guess I was quite lucky because when I was working for my dad, like, I'd seen the runnings of a business because it was his company. So I kind of knew some of the things that you need to do to run a business rather than just totally starting from scratch.
Sure, you can see what was possible almost, I guess, and just, I guess, all the different aspects of the business that you might have to be involved in, all the different things you'd have to do.
Yeah, and I think I didn't, like, do you know, it's like, oh, everything happens for a reason, or, you know, you can take the good out of things. I didn't really realize, oh, that was actually a good experience, because I was still thinking, oh, I didn't like working for him. But I did a presentation because when I was at uni, I did like a course that were like, you went once a month, and it was just like skills for women, like how to be assertive and, you know, things like that. But I went back the following year and did a presentation about my blog and sort of what I was doing and like being a therapist and stuff. And then someone kind of pointed it out to me, like, oh, do you actually think that that experience working for your parents and like running the business helped you now? And I was like, oh yeah, it did, but I totally didn't appreciate that. So I obviously you don't need that, but it was just helpful for me.
Sure. Well, I guess it's helpful, isn't it? I guess even just having, yes, someone else kind of modeling what it's like to have a business. I guess it gives you that insight as well into what's possible, doesn't it? Maybe it kind of, you have a bit more of an open mind to business, maybe.
Yeah, like when I started, I did get a business coach, although I don't think she was a good fit because I didn't really know how to pick a business coach. And like, I've got a business coach now as well, but I think I know more about how to structure it. Because again, I think sometimes, I'm not sure if you find, having a business is lonely. Like, again, you're doing stuff on your own, and then sometimes my friends like aren't around for a coffee, or I try and talk to my husband and he says he's listening, but I don't think he is. So I think it does help to talk to people about stuff like that too, and get some support.
Yeah, no, absolutely, doesn't it? I think you kind of, you definitely need people to kind of inspire and encourage and like lift you up and kind of say, yeah, no, I've been there too. It's so important, isn't it?
Yeah, I think, like you said as well, just providing other ideas and stuff that you hadn't even thought of. Just like, oh yeah, I could do that as well.
Definitely. So Rachel, do you have any kind of special interests? Like, do you work with people with all the eating disorders and disordered eating, or, does it sort of go across the spectrum?
Yeah, it does. What I would say is, because I'm in private practice, I do work with people who want to change. I don't work on helping people want to change, like people that come to me with already, even if they are sort of ambivalent to change, so they recognize that they need to, but maybe they don't want to, but they've recognized the problem. Or sometimes then we have a session when they're like, oh, actually, I signed up to work with you, but I'm not sure that I do need to work with you. And then we have a talk about why they're here, but there was something in them in the beginning that they recognized, oh, this is impacting my life in a negative way. So it would always be people who recognized it. And then, in terms of eating disorders, whatever people are presenting with really disordered eating. I've only worked with a few people with like avoidant restrictive disorder, but I think it's just whoever finds me and comes to me, because I guess I don't talk about that very much on my social media, so maybe people wouldn't know about that.
But it's really interesting as well, isn't it? Like, I think just your whole thing about saying about the motivation, because I guess with eating disorders, disordered eating, it's very common, isn't it, that people are quite ambivalent sometimes about change. But I think it's such a good point, really, in a way, that if people are signing up with you and they're kind of they're kind of saying, I might be a bit ambivalent, but I am motivated, I am ready to change, then as well, I guess it's going to mean that the impact of the therapy is going to be so much more powerful, isn't it? And they're going to be able to kind of use all those tools and everything that you're able to offer them to the best advantage.
Yeah, I definitely think so, because some of my clients have got really good results or like had really big changes. And then sometimes my worry is people will think like, oh, that's too good to be true. But like I say, it's already the people who, some of my clients have had an eating disorder for 17 years, but then they're like, I cannot do this anymore. Right, I'm going to change. I'm willing to let you help me now. Yeah. So I think I have bypassed some of that, because I don't think it would be very ethical for me to try and hold people, or just to keep them safe while they're working through it themselves to the point that they want to change. I don't really feel comfortable doing that bit.
Yeah, and I think it's really true, actually, because I think even sort of obviously I work sort of partly in the NHS, and even in the NHS we tend to really work with that motivational model. So if someone isn't really up and ready for change at that moment, you might do a short piece of work with them, but you wouldn't sort of work with them endlessly, because I think it can quite sort of devalue almost the therapy, or I don't know, you can almost kind of collude with the eating disorder, couldn't you? Maybe unintentionally. So, I think it's just a really good point, isn't it, actually?
Sometimes my husband is like, sometimes I'd say, obviously not anything confidential, but like, oh, I had a call with someone today about working with me, but I don't think that they were really ready. Or, is there something broad brush up when he's like, how was your day? And he'll be like, oh, if they're willing to pay you, why don't you just do it? But I feel bad taking people's money if I'm just giving them that holding space. I don't know. It just doesn't quite sit with me. So I don't. I would always try and refer people, I think, if they wanted that.
Sure. Yeah. No, I think it makes sense, doesn't it? And I think as well, it's frustrating for the client and also frustrating for the therapist, I think, when you're not in that place of change, because you can both feel a bit stuck in the mud, can't you, I think? But anyway, no, it's really, really interesting. So Rachel, can you talk us through a bit about how you work with people? Because I know you've obviously got some psychology training, hypnotherapy training, and neurolinguistic programming. So just really interested to hear more about that.
Yeah, so what I do now, partly to avoid people ghosting me, is because I know I did that to a therapist, as I was saying, I tend to work with people over the course of 3 months, and then we will evaluate at the end of the 3 months. So I think it really helps me for planning to know where we're going or what to do the next session or 2 sessions time. Like it's very hard if people aren't committed to sort of go on that journey. So I do tend to work in sort of blocks, or like, well, I call it a program for lack of a better word, but it's all bespoke. So it's not really, this is week 1, this is week 2. But we kind of start with like a 3-hour breakthrough session, which people are like, oh, 3 hours, but it goes so quickly once you start talking. And I think it's just really good chance to find out what's happening for people now, and then start to think about what do they want in the future, and sort of make that come to life a bit more. So they are like, oh, actually, that is what I do, and I am feeling more motivated to get that now. And I think people often struggle because kind of, what do you want? Well, I don't want to feel like this. I don't want to feel like that anymore. I don't want to think about this. It's like, what actually do you want then? Because in terms of the NLP, I think it comes into other psychology, but neuro-linguistic programming especially, or maybe the hypnotherapy training I did too, of like, your mind can't process a negative. So if you say, oh, I don't want to eat all the cookies, you can't think about that without thinking about all the cookies. And then you've sort of activated that representation. So I'm really trying to help people frame in the positive what they want that we're working towards. And I think even that is really helpful sometimes. And then from the first session, starting to look back to see if we can see any patterns or anything that was sort of going on when the eating disorder developed, or sort of before that. And sometimes people do have a really big like, oh God, yeah, that's what was going on. That makes total sense. I can see this pattern now. But for other people, we, don't have such a big, okay, this is really clear. And then I'd probably have a few one-to-one sessions with people, just kind of, again, going over what are the main issues, and then trying to already help them think differently about those things. And maybe like, it's kind of led by the client. Sometimes people like mini challenges. I'm not sure if you find that too. Sometimes people are like, please tell me to try and eat this food this week. And I'm like, okay, I'll tell you to try and eat that food this week if you want to. But sometimes people don't want that. It just really depends. And then usually in the first month, we'll have a hypnotherapy session as well. The kind that I do, we do like a regression. So it's like, we're going to go back to a scene, a memory. Maybe it's something that someone told you. What is underlying the eating disorder? And sometimes people think about something that they've thought about before. Sometimes it's like, oh, I didn't remember that. Can't think how to phrase this properly. Like, I didn't think about that since it happened. And often people do think about it in a different way and just get that bit deeper than if we just had a chat about, oh, what was happening there? And it's, oh, I just went to my auntie's house and this happened. That we can get really, what is this belief that you made about yourself? Usually about yourself, but about food. So it might be bullying and just believing what the people said was true. And we can kind of look at that, but we can reframe it in hypnosis. And my favorite thing that someone ever said, I'm just going to say it now because I don't think I've said it on a podcast before. I was like, oh my God, my client is so insightful. Like, she was like, oh, it never should have been said, so I never should have believed it. And I was like, oh my, like, jaw drop moments. That was just like, oh my, exactly. Like, just to help people have that awareness of these things, because I think often when people are bullied, we do believe what the people are saying, and then we can carry that with us. Like, I've had so many clients, and you possibly have too, can remember the exact words that were said to them and how that made them feel. So yeah, just helping. There's lots of different techniques I can use in the session then to help people, like I say, reframe that or think differently about it, and sort of, I guess, put it to bed in a way. So it's still like, yes, that thing still happened to you. I'm not taking your memory away, but you can just look at it in a different way, and you don't need to carry that with you anymore. So often people do say, oh, I feel a little lighter now we've sort of addressed that. And then also people get a recording to listen to. It is a hypnosis recording, but it kind of feels like a guided meditation that's like the positive suggestions and like things that you want in your life. And so obviously I make it really personal for the person, and it's just, again, partly motivational. And I'm like, even if it wasn't working on the hypnosis level and like rewiring your brain level, it's helping you feel better the day that you listen to it. But I think it does. I love it when clients say to me like, oh, I was in a certain situation and I just heard your voice, like it's okay to, or I did one recently for a client, because often the first ones will be about their beliefs about food, or where did the eating disorder come from, kind of a more specific question around that. Then we kind of have one a month for the 3 months. So the last one might end up being something a bit more general, like confidence to go back to school, or I did one about anxiety, sort of general anxiety with a client. And in that recording, I was kind of saying about, anxiety is left over from when there was like physical threats to our body as well. And kind of in the recording, I put something about, there's no bear, where's the bear? And she was like, when I get anxious, I hear you saying, where's the bear? I think it's just like nice little stuff like that as well. So yeah, and then sort of in between hypnotherapy sessions, then we'll sort of have 1 hour sessions sort of weekly as well.
Sure. I mean, I love the way actually that you give your clients that recording. So I think that's just very powerful actually, isn't it? That they've not only had that session with you, but then they can take that away. And then I don't know how many times one would listen to it, but it's really nice to know that you probably could do that. And in a way, your voice is there, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? They kind of can access that at any point, I guess, which is really helpful, I think. Just quite sort of symbolic, I think, the fact that you're kind of giving them something like that.
Yeah. So the recording, it's not of the whole session, it's just of the positive suggestions at the end, just in case anyone was wondering who's listening. And then it's kind of recommended that people listen to it for 21 days. Having studied habits, I don't think it's a rule that it takes 21 days to make a habit, but that's just sort of what it was based on, I think. And sort of people find it doable to listen to it for that amount of time. But again, it's like, this is why I want clients who are motivated. I can try and help you, but if you don't listen to your recording, it's like people get the shift from the session, the aha moment.
Yeah.
But for some people that is enough, and they're like, oh, do you know what? Like, I've had clients say, I don't feel guilty about eating anymore after one session, but it's not that all their problems about the eating disorder have ever gone away. No, I didn't mean that. I don't mean, do you know what I mean? All their problems they'll never go away. I don't know, that wasn't phrased very well. There are still other things for us to address. But yeah, I don't know where I was going with that before I got confused.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds as well, Rachel, the way you're working is actually, because I guess you're using a variety of different things, and it's quite intensive, but in like quite a positive, constructive way. And I guess in a way, the client's really sort of jumping in and getting, you're kind of giving them lots to think about, things to listen to. It's a very kind of proactive therapy, isn't it? And in a way, I guess if people really do wholeheartedly invest in that, I mean, they're going to get great results, aren't they, really? Because there's just that real commitment to the journey.
Yeah, I think, to be perfectly honest, sometimes people are like, oh, when I tell them the price, they're like, that is more than I thought. But then also thinking, the first session is 3 hours. The hypnotherapy sessions are about 3 hours as well. Like, in terms of time, like you say, it is quite intensive, which I make clear to people in the beginning. But in my mind, I think it's the pressure I put on myself to try and help people, which I'm still working through by myself and with my business coach, of like, let people take their own time to do it. It's about them, obviously. But, I just think the stuff that we could cover in 3 hours in the first session, I don't want to spread out over a month. I want the person to feel like, yes, we can get going on this, rather than she's still asking me questions, just introductory questions for ages. So, I mean, most people enjoy it.
It's powerful, isn't it? I think that whole thing about momentum is very true, because I know Christopher Fairburn talks about with cognitive behavior therapy that if you can get momentum going within those first sort of like 6 hours or 6 sessions or whatever, that's going to really help the rest of the therapy, and it almost like determines the outcome of the therapy. So I think there's so much to be said for that, isn't there? Kind of really getting people in, like, more intense, really kind of engaged, and kind of getting going when they're motivated, and you're much more likely as well then for them to be able to get really great results.
Yeah.
So Rachel, how do you work to find a healthy balance with food and exercise in your life today?
For me, I think it's actually like letting health take a backseat. And I think just because I was so obsessed about being healthy, I have kind of good habits in a way anyway, of like eating fruit and vegetables and that sort of thing. I did think recently for exercise, I used to do so many like high intensity workouts before, but I tried to do some recently because I did an Instagram Q&A with someone who is a personal trainer, and she's got an app. And I was like, oh, maybe I will get into it, because usually I like walking outside, but I don't really like walking outside in winter. So I was like, oh, I probably should do something active, because otherwise I am literally just sat down all day with my job. But I tried to do a few and I was just like, this isn't for me. So I'm going to have to find a plan B. I just like couldn't concentrate during the rest of the day. Like I couldn't calm down after like all the jumping around and everything. So oh yeah, I did join a gym at the start of this year, but then obviously COVID happened, and then I tried to get my money back, but they've not replied to me. I think I just need stuff that I can do in my house that's maybe fairly relaxing, enjoyable. I'll try and get back into yoga, I think. I think for me, it's just about doing bits when you can and not obsessing about it, really. I think walking is my favourite, to be honest, because you can pop on a podcast, like go for a walk. It's really enjoyable. Yeah. How about for you? Have you ever answered it on a podcast?
In terms of how I find a healthy balance.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I'm a bit like you, really, that it's kind of definitely a bit go with the flow, and it goes through phases of things. Like, I mean, I really enjoy, like, as a child, I used to really like climbing trees and doing like climbing things, and occasionally I will, like, I don't do it very often, but I really like, I kind of dabbled a bit in like women's parkour, when you kind of, but really like basic level, because you think of parkour, don't you, and you think of like people jumping
off a building.
Like, but you can scale it down like on a really low level, and it's great fun. It doesn't feel like exercise or anything, but to be honest with you, I don't do it loads. Like I've got 3 children, and to like do a lot of that really cool stuff, you kind of have to go to London and stuff, and it's just with COVID and also just with life, there's not really a lot of times. So I'm a bit like you, really. I love walking outside. I do kind of sometimes go to like the local boot camp in our town, but again, I try and just be really kind of relaxed about it and just really listen to my body, actually. So nothing too pressured. And I think, like you're saying as well, I think, like for me as well, like health and fitness, and it's kind of, I want to kind of keep my body ticking over, but it's not the biggest priority for me, really. There's other things that are more important, so it's kind of in its place, I guess.
I think, like, if I haven't eaten a vegetable for a few days, which rarely happens, because like I say, I'm kind of in the habit of eating them, but then I will kind of think, oh, maybe I should eat a vegetable. Or if I haven't left my house for like 3 days because my office is at home, then I do think, maybe you should leave the house today and go for a walk. But usually it just sort of sorts itself out, really.
No, sure. No, I think it's so true, isn't it? And it's great, and it's so helpful, I think, as well, to hear that obviously, like, when you tried doing this app, and then you kind of you very quickly perhaps realize it wasn't for you, and you're able to just kind of adjust to that and not carry on with it. And I guess it just shows how far you've come on your own journey.
I would like to, but it's just not go. The thing is, there's so many workouts on YouTube as well. Do you know, if I was like, actually, I would like to do a HIIT workout today, I think I would just go on YouTube and do one, or I know some exercises myself, so I think I would just do some. I don't know, I feel like, so we're talking about this question for ages, but do you know, when it's summer, then actually I do have a bit more energy. I actually did a couple more workouts and stuff in the summer, but I think when it's winter, I'm really like, in the winter season, I just want to like be wrapped up and do relaxing things.
No, sure. Well, that's probably going more with the kind of natural cycle of our bodies and stuff, isn't it? I think we'd be in a cave hiding from the bear, wouldn't we? So Rachel, what do you think we can do, like, big question, to support young people growing up to have a better relationship with food and their bodies?
Okay.
So just tell us in a couple of sentences, please.
I think some of it then will be, although I'm thinking, like, do you know, when you're at school and people come in and do lessons about stuff and you're like, this is so boring, I'm not listening. But just like social media literacy, and just, I mean, people know, but they don't connect it about everything is filtered and airbrushed, and just, recognize it. Do you see those pictures, which part of me is like, oh, I don't know if this picture is trying to diss the celebrity or just say this is what's happening, but of like the perfect airbrushed face with no wrinkles and like no lines, and then the actual what the celebrity looks like with some wrinkles and maybe a spot. And so just helping them realize, actually, this, I'm going to say perfection in inverted commas, is not real. Because I think now as well, isn't it? I don't know the exact statistics, so don't quote me, but like that young people are going to plastic surgeons like, can I look like myself in this filtered image, rather than it used to be more like, can I look like this celebrity? And I think actually even my friend, when we were having coffee the other day, so she's in her 40s, was saying that after she tried some filters on Instagram and then she looked at her normal face, she had this thought about not being happy about it. Maybe I should look like a filter. And like, she is quite self-aware that she was able to be like, oh, you know, that was not healthy. Where did that come from? But I think if you're, this maybe sounds offensive to young people, but if you are more impressionable, maybe you don't have that kind of self-talk or self-awareness, then that might be a problem. I mean, I'm not saying let's never have a filter, but just using them. Like, I try not to filter so much on social media. Sometimes I do. Like, I put up a story today with like the puppy dog ear filter because I had a shower earlier and now all my makeup's a mess. And I was just like, I look a bit like a weird Halloween zombie because all my mascara got. So I was like, I'm just doing the puppy filter to make myself feel better. But I often try not to do filters. But then I think also just trying to help boost people's self-esteem and really help them know you are a good person, regardless of what anyone else said, or like regardless of what mark you got in this exam, because I think there's a lot of pressure. I don't have clients who are under 16, but my sort of 16 to 18-year-olds are putting so much pressure on themselves to do well at school and have their whole life planned out. And I think it seems like, well, I thought I put a lot of pressure on myself, but it seems like even more for them these days as well. Yeah, I'm not sure if that really answered it and how we would exactly go about boosting their self-esteem and helping them know, you know, their strength and things. But I think that would be the way to go.
Yeah, and I so agree with you, I think, really, because I think, the self-esteem bit, in a way, if you've got robust self-esteem, you're in a better place, aren't you? More resilient, I think, to deal with all the stuff that's thrown at you. Whereas if you haven't got good self-esteem, you know, you're just so much more vulnerable to going down a destructive road, I guess, and being seduced by kind of diet culture. Yeah, it's a tricky one though, isn't it? And I think you're right as well, just so much pressure on young people. I think it's sort of increasingly so, isn't it? And yeah, I guess the more we can really just somehow help people just to feel kind of good enough, and they're not just, worthy if they're, meeting conditions in terms of how they look or the grades they get or whatever.
Something you constantly need to work on, if that makes sense. Like, I'm still working on that. My business coach, whenever we get down to the root of everything, it's always like, oh, okay, so you think you're a bad person or you don't think you're good enough on a subconscious level. I'm like, oh, great, okay. Back to here again. I think it's something that people will always do work on. But I think, again, if you're aware of it or you're doing stuff about it, you can sort of defend yourself a bit more. Like you said, that resilience coming in.
Yeah, no, definitely. No, it's a lifelong journey, isn't it? I think. Yeah, and self-awareness definitely helps. I just think as well sometimes, because I work in like an adult service, and sometimes when we work with people who have been through like the child and adolescent services with counselling, and they've already, it's just remarkable actually sometimes just how, even if they may be still struggling with their mental health, just the awareness they have from talking about stuff from early on, it's just so valuable. Okay, Rachel, final quick fire questions for you. So what would be your last supper 3-course meal?
Okay, I think maybe like pea soup. Quite a fan of peas. I eat them like every day. I like pea and mint. And then main course, I want to say avocado on toast. It's not like a main course meal, but it's like my favorite thing. Maybe some eggs too. And soy sauce is really yummy on avocado toast and eggs. And then dessert, probably, like, this is not very indulgent, but probably just chocolate, like mint dark chocolate. Like, I love mint. I do like a pudding, but I feel like if I'm eating a 3-course meal, I think I might be a bit full. Oh no, avocado toast isn't that filling. I don't know. Probably just chocolate. Like, do you know sometimes if you have a cake and then it's like, oh, that wasn't as good as I thought. Chocolate is always a safe bet.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I love chocolate. And do you have a favourite quote or mantra?
I feel like, maybe like done it. What do I always think? Like, what is it? Done is better than perfect. Sometimes I always have to remind myself of that. Like, it really helped me finish my PhD, actually, just be like, just get it done. Like, just know when it's good enough. I often have that conversation with clients. When is it good enough? Is, spending 3 more hours on this going to make it any better? No, just get it done. Or even now when I write my email newsletter, I'm like, just write something. Otherwise, they're not going to hear from you for another month. Just do it.
Yeah, no, good enough. Definitely. Good advice, isn't it? I think. And can you tell us something about you that may surprise us?
Yes. Maybe if people listened to me before, they might know, but maybe you don't know. I actually have a medal from an international life-saving competition.
Ooh.
Yeah, so I used to do life-saving when I was at uni, and it is a competitive sport. We did a lot of training. So it's like swimming, kind of races, or like towing people. And then one of the things as well is like they set up a little scenario for you, like people drowning and stuff, and then you have to go in your team and like save everyone, and you get points for like how well you do the first aid, like how safe you're being yourself, like how you talk to your team and stuff. So I did that for a lot of years. I was on the England team.
Wow, gosh, what a great skill to have. So yeah, fantastic. And is that something like, have you had to like use that sort of skill in real life? Any kind of real life rescues?
No, luckily not. I was a lifeguard for a while because that's just the easy job when life saving, like sort of when I was about 18 and a bit at uni as well. But to be honest, this sounds a bit sexist, but anytime anything happened, like even if someone got a nosebleed, all the guys were like, I'll deal with this. And I was like, oh, okay, go ahead. Or like, luckily no one ever like drowned or nearly drowned when I was on a shift. So I think I only had to deal with like minor things really.
Yeah, sure. Okay, well, I suppose you never know in the future, but yeah, let's hope you don't have to utilize that skill. But I guess it's such a valuable life skill to have, isn't it?
Yeah, like I really loved it, and that was, like I say, probably a factor in my eating disorder. That was so much, actually. Just sorry, I know we're going to go over the time, but like I got so much of my self-worth from doing that, and it took so much time. Like I would train every day for like several hours a day, either in the gym and the pool, and like all my friends were there. And then I think when I left uni, like I didn't do it when I was doing my masters because I lived at home, and then it was further to like drive to training, and I just felt too old, in inverted commas, even though I look back and I was like, oh my God, you were not old, but just then I think all that, it wasn't taken away from me, but it kind of was. And I didn't realize how much that one thing was giving me until I kind of look back on it. And then I do feel sad sometimes about it. And I've tried to go back, but I just cannot fit it in my life now. Like now my job is my priority, kind of, unfortunately. But just that's it really. But it was so good at the time.
But at least it's such a valuable reflection, actually, isn't it, as well? Because I think sometimes like an eating disorder kind of can come in, can't it? And if there's a bit of a void, maybe in terms of like purpose, achievement, or relationships or whatever, the eating disorder can kind of step in, can't it, and fill that hole almost. So I think it helped to share. So Rachel, where can people find you as well if they want to, know more about, what you do and all of that?
Yeah, so my Instagram is rachel.evans.phd, and then possibly confusingly, because I think you're the eating disorder therapist, aren't you, on Instagram? My website is eatingdisordertherapist.co.uk.
Okay, right. Yeah. Sure.
I was like, oh, no one's got this title. I'll just go for this, or the website. You should have jumped on it.
Sure.
And then I think I found you afterwards, and I was like, oh, well, got this now.
Yeah. Oh, well, no, never mind. Abundance and all that. There's like plenty of space, isn't there, for all of us? Okay, brilliant. No, Rachel, because I'm sure, people will want to go and like check out and find out more about you. So Rachel, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate, everything you've shared and all the valuable insight you've given, really, really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
So I hope you enjoyed this interview just as much as I did, and do go and check out all of Rachel's details in the show notes. Now, if you're not following me already, do seek me out on Instagram at the Eating Disorder Therapist. And for regular blogs to your inbox, do sign up at rethinkyourbody.co.uk. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to sharing another podcast episode with you very soon.